Well, I'm joined here today on a new segment for the podcast called Second Sessions. And I thought it would be fun to kind of add this in. It's a good way to kind of talk about magic in general rather than just card magic. So I'm joined today by a good friend of mine that I met over quarantine, Marc, who is a magician who was in New York. Where are you now?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia now.
And how's that?
It's not New York, but it's a very cool city. It's like kind of equated to, it's got kind of like a Philadelphia, New Orleans vibe to it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's got like the old world charm of New Orleans, but it's kind of, it's still like an East Coast city, but quiet.
I'm going down to New Orleans in June, actually. And hopefully we're vaccinated by then to go down to New Orleans. Who knows? If you don't hear from me ever again, it's because I turned into a zombie. So
yeah, it's very easy to do there. You just have a few frozen Irish coffees at Aaron Rose, and you'll never be heard from again.
Yeah. There you go.
There's a massive cocktail convention there every year called Tales of the Cocktail. I've never been able to go, but I've heard a lot of stories. It's just like complete debauchery.
Yeah. I didn't realize, I was looking in kind of preparing for this episode. I didn't realize when you were in New York how into cocktails you were. You were bartenders, right? So yeah. I didn't realize how into that world of mixing drinks, and you have your own drink, right? You created this drink. I saw you tease it the other day.
Yeah, my the restaurant that I used to manage, a spot called Nobody Told Me on the Upper West Side. I was the beverage director there and bar manager, and the owner, Alberto, and I came up with a bunch of beverages, and they were preparing to reopen, and he was going back, I think, to some of their old posts and actually adding the recipes.
Right.
Kind of always the goal to kind of open source it and like have the recipes available for people to be able to like look and make, not necessarily on the menu, but on the website or something. So he brought that up, and that was one of my favorites from our opening menu when we opened. Yeah, I think back in 2018 or 2019.
That's pretty cool. What is the drink? A jigger? What do they call it?
Oh, that one. That was different. So that was the mini julep.
So apparently you have more than one drink.
Yeah. Created a lot of cocktails over the year. Yeah, the mini julep was kind of like a joke that I did for Instagram. People to come in and see me at this bar I worked at called Blind Barber, which was essentially serving a julep in a jigger. So it was like an ounce of alcohol, dressed up to look like a julep tin.
Right.
I do also like coming up with just kind of like zany, bonkers drinks like that.
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned the Blind Barber. So you worked at the bar behind the shop?
Yes, yeah.
So when I was going to barber college 2015, probably late 14, I came across the Blind Barber because my specialty in barbering was classic haircuts. So stuff from like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Although I have a beanie on now, I used to have a really big Elvis pompadour, like very skin faded, and it was just beautifully coiffed back.
Oh, nice.
It took hours to do. It's one of those things where it was like there was nobody at the time in barbering that was doing classic cuts, and Blind Barber was one of those places because I wanted to open up a shop that had a speakeasy in the back, so I was looking for business models, and Blind Barber was one of them.
Yeah, they did a really good job with that, and it was a fun place to work because we didn't lean too heavily into like we're a speakeasy, like all the bartenders are in suspenders and stuff like that. It was a very kind of laid back environment, and then a club on the weekends. It would just be funny because the overlap would be like people would be getting their haircuts while like drunk NYU kids were starting to stumble in. That was a fun place to work.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what was the clientele there, because I've been to a lot of barber shops, like in the United States, like in this area, and it varies depending on the region that you're in it.
So the barbershop clientele itself was very, people who were into having kind of a cut above experience. Yeah. It wasn't expensive by any stretch, but, it was that kind of classic barber experience. You get the straight razor shave and the vintage chairs, which were all like sourced. The bar clientele was interesting because I would usually work during the week. I had a different weekend gig, but it was the East Village.
Yeah.
We would get a lot of tourists. We were actually on a speakeasy tour. So, you'd have like your kind of like hip FIDI guys coming in with like, and then a tour group of just a bunch of like middle-aged tourists from Texas or Arkansas or California. Yeah. And they would come in and I would kind of help the guy on his tour a little bit when he wanted to like discuss different liquor aspect. He had like the history of the area down pretty well.
Yeah.
Be like, is this a real speakeasy? And I'm like, no. Cops come in here right now.
Yeah.
We're fine.
Yeah. It's interesting. The speakeasy thing is definitely like right up my alley. So I'm curious to know when did I know you came back into magic? So like at one point did you come back into magic?
So I came back into magic when I was about like 25 or 26, okay. I want to say. My girlfriend and I were watching Fool Us just on a whim. We had never like watched it or discussed magic before. And I started kind of like calling out a few things that I thought they were doing because that's the nature of the show. Yeah. And she's like, if you can do magic and you didn't tell me, because we've been dating for like a year at that point. Yeah. She's like, if you do magic and you tell me, I'm going to kill you. And I was like, well, I don't remember anything, but I think I grabbed like a deck of cards and I did like Biddle trick or something. There was like one trick that does not, when you're like put on the spot, you kind of forget everything that you know. It's like one thing because I've been doing it since I was like 12. Right. So I did that and she was like, oh no, you have to follow this. And I think she like bought me some stuff that year.
Oh, wow.
And then, I just, I kind of realized I was working in the area of like tannins or, the job I was working at, sometimes I didn't get out quite in time to catch tannins, but I could get like Phantasma closed an hour later. Yeah. It just kind of grew from there.
Isn't there Abracadabra magic shop too? Or that's not really a magic shop.
There's a couple like costume shops that have one right over in like Flatiron, and then, the big costume shop that everybody knew down in Union Square, which actually just closed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the greatest shortcut in New York, so you could just walk through to get over like an avenue without having to worry about like the street or anything like that. But that was good. Yeah, and you would go down there and, it was a magic counter in a costume shop, but they would have like, all the pitch tricks and a few other things, but then they also had like Tarbell.
It's like our magic shop here. I live in the city over next to Marietta, and Marietta kind of is well known because the guy who's on Food Network, he has his own shows. Alton Brown lives like right around the corner from here. So he's always up on what we call Marietta Square, and they've shot a ton of movies there. Night Watch was shot there. They shoot a bunch of shows there. But it's one of those things where the magic shop there is small. It's been there apparently since the late 70s. And it's one of those costumes, magic shops, makeup, contact lenses, all in one. Not only can you get a Copperfield costume there, you could also get the magic as well. Last time I was there, which was way before quarantine, I had looked to go see if they had anything like book-wise, and they had a Jerry Menser book, which I picked up. They had 2 copies, so I picked them up because I'm like, who's going to buy them? Right. And they had Harry Lorraine's Collective, but it was overpriced. Like, I can find it on eBay secondhand for less than that.
Right.
So that's why I shop at Tannins.
Yeah. I've been trying to keep giving them my business as much as possible. Because we have a shop here, too, but it's like the guy behind the counter is the guy who runs it, very adept sleight of hand performer, and clearly magic's his passion, but he's had to like sell, crystals and candles and all that stuff to kind of supplement. And it looks like they have a lot of really good stuff. It's just buried because it's kind of, it's kind of a mess.
Yeah.
I popped in there once when we first came down to, see if this was an area that we'd like. And, we couldn't be in there too long. But I was like, oh, there's definitely some stuff hidden in here. Yeah. It's not quite in the city. It's a little bit outside. Yeah. So I haven't had a chance to go over and, try to give them a little business just because,
Yeah, let's kind of dive into, when did you leave magic?
Probably around college, honestly.
Okay, so it wasn't like me who took like a decade off from magic.
No. It came close, but it was just one of those, like, I just kind of, it never really like I'm going to stop doing this. I did it a few times at a party and like had a very like rude awakening to the fact that I wasn't very good. Mm-hmm. Most people have been doing it casually in their teens because I didn't, I was never really one to perform too much when I was originally doing it. It was really, just kind of something to do and something to learn. And I would pull it out every now and then. Yeah. Kids across the street liked when I would do like chaos card through window on my car or something like that. A good one. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, and then it was, I just kind of fell out for a little bit. It was always something I would like think about, or anytime I picked up cards, playing cards somewhere, I'd be like, oh, I remember this, like the worst double lift you've ever seen. And I didn't really have any plans to perform. It was just like, oh, this would be a fun thing to do. But it was then that I kind of realized it's like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And I'm going to try to actually get to the level that I kind of wanted to before, but maybe didn't exactly have the guidance or the understanding yet.
Yeah.
Even as a teen, with the internet kind of really taking off around that time, it was still kind of a hodgepodge of, if you get lucky, you'll find like the right source or the right resource or something like that. But it was a lot of just like input, output. There wasn't a lot of connection between your downloads or your DVDs or stuff like that. Yeah. Luckily, coming back in and also having a little bit of disposable income.
Yeah.
Oh, I could do this, and just finding those right sources was able to further my understanding and try to actually get good. But
yeah, it's an interesting point when you kind of like step back from Magic. Did you kind of see the industry change a little bit, or like, because it wasn't that long, based on my math, it wasn't that long.
Yeah, when I kind of came back into it, it was, like, oh, all these shops all the online shops I remember are still there.
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, I could pop back onto Penguin or Illusionist or Theory 11. Especially with the explosion of Magic on Instagram, for better or for worse, you were like, I was able to kind of pick out like, oh, this is somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And what are they doing? This doesn't look like anything that I was seeing 10 years ago. And then come to find out, they're doing something from 50, 60 years ago. And paying attention and seeing like little leads to different places, picking up little things like, oh, there's, Real Magic magazine.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. If you really dig around on there, there's some great stuff. It's how I got back into coins, because I know Harbottle does like a coins 101. And when I was younger, I was like, that's probably a little beyond, my pay grade. Yeah. It kind of always was intimidating. But then watching that, I was like, oh, this is actually, having a competent instructor going back and being like, I'm fine going back to foundational stuff.
Yeah.
And, really cleaning up, what was probably incredibly sloppy technique that hadn't been touched in, 10 years.
Yeah. I think that's interesting too. Coming back into Magic, it was the same thing. Like there were certain things I was playing with, performing. And for me, I mean, a decade's much longer than like a few years. When I came back into it, the industry had completely changed over. I mean, everything was not, I don't want to say virtual because now that term means something else. It was different. Everything was online. I noticed a lot of the Magic shops kind of were slowing down and just dormant. Same thing with Magic Club. I will say that going back into it 10 years later, which was only a couple years ago, it's interesting to see my influences now compared to what they were before. I mean, the quality of Magic is significantly different, right? So like, who are you looking at now? Who's influencing you now?
Well, we all say Williamson, of course, because that's who, I really took to, because I think I had seen some of his stuff. I like, in watching videos, I'm like, oh, I recognize this guy. Like, I recognize World's Greatest Magic, like Rocky Raccoons. Yeah. But then also finding guys like Doc Eason, which for me, behind the bar that's kind of what I want to do. And there's not, you're not going to find a lot of video references for like Eddie Fector or JC Wagner or stuff. I mean, there's books and volumes and stuff, but to see somebody in action, especially in a field like bar magic, which isn't as heavily documented. Yeah. But
what about Mike Peixoto?
Yeah, Mike Peixoto is great. That was another one that was like a more recent discovery, I think, within like the last years. Yeah. I picked up, I think, one of his videos, and there's just some extraordinary work on there. Because he's also, you see guys doing like shows behind the bar, but he's also like, he's got to make the drinks too. Just like that kind of structure. Yeah. My ideal would be, to show up and be behind the bar and do a couple shows a week, but it's much more likely that I'm going to be bartending and doing that, actually making the restaurant money. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it recently, but Doc Eason did an interview for Scott Wells, I think it was. And it was interesting to hear him talk about bar magic and his history in bar magic. And he pretty much was saying that like he doesn't lecture very much anymore because he doesn't think, there's anyone out there who's doing bar magic. It's starting to come back around again very slowly. But that niche market of specifically a bar magician is like almost non-existent, in my opinion, from my knowledge. I mean, there's a few people out there like Bishota, and I mean, obviously you have your knowledge on bar magic and whatnot. So it's kind of interesting to see it kind of is slowly starting to come back, because there are people who are like, for me, I did food service for 10 years, right? So it would have been great for me to be behind the bar because I was kind of everywhere, like host stand, bar, and this and that. And it would have been cool to kind of just have some skills to where like we're in the weeds in the bar, which I don't know how that happens, but you're in the weeds in the bar, just kind of like entertain everyone and kind of like morale would be better. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I never really played with it. Probably should if I ever go back to the restaurant industry.
Yeah, it's really nice because it's not sit down, at a card table, but you essentially have that table built in, so you can do a lot of like table work as well as in the hands. There's just a lot of room, and it's an incredibly niche market, which I'm hoping kind of works to my advantage come like things starting to open back up and trying to find work.
Do you see bar magic kind of picking up again? Like, are you seeing that as well, that people are interested in bar magic a little bit?
I think so. Every now and then I'll hop over. I think the cafe has like I'm not an active member on the cafe. I just usually, if I'm looking for something specific, that's a good, type what you want to search plus magic cap. Usually we'll bring up something, especially because a lot of the things we search have other meanings and other things, and the SEO isn't very good. So usually what I'll do is if I'm looking for something specific, I'll start with that and then branch out from whatever links people have. They have people doing it. A lot of people want to get started in it. It's hard because a lot of times you do have to bartend, which is a very different skill set, and food service isn't easy. Well, I think within that too, it's a lot of people doing restaurant walk around. That's probably like the closest thing is like, we'll probably see a bigger resurgence in that, which I mean, it already exists, but being in New York City specifically for so long, there weren't a lot of like restaurant guys either.
Really?
Yeah, I know they existed, but not in the cocktail scene for sure, and not in any of the fine dining stuff that I did. I knew it was a little more prevalent out on the island.
Yeah. What'd you go to school for?
Film production.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Hey,
It's something I do for, it's one of my options.
I love it.
Getting back into, I used to be in IATSE. I was doing theater work at the time. I was actually, my first gig as a union stagehand was Copperfield.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I've talked about that on my Instagram before. Oh man, I think I'm still under like a $500,000 NDA or something like that. Watching from the wings, I was still like, what the hell is he doing?
Yeah.
Like, I have the perfect view of like, how does he do this? And still don't know.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah,
in the dark.
I hear that. I have a buddy who worked with him at the museum. I can't really talk about it, but he worked with him at the museum, and there were things that just like baffled him that like Copperfield had in his collection, or just he worked on his show for a little bit of time as well. I believe so, and same thing. He's just like, here's an interesting story I can share about Copperfield, aside from him being like one of the biggest influences for me. But I've seen Copperfield many times, and he came here in Atlanta, and I went with some friends of mine. I think it was like the last time he came, so mid 2000s maybe. He came, and my friend was picked to go on stage, and it was the 13 Vanishing People, which I guess he's not doing anymore because of the whole lawsuit or whatever.
Yeah.
And he went up there, and I told him specifically, because like I'm obviously being a magician, I was like, go up there, like I'm curious to know, like just video, like in your head, video record everything, because I'm not going to be on stage, so I don't know. So he goes up there, and this is the weird part about it, which I obviously as a magician you understand it later, but it was interesting for him to like, you go around the box and stuff, and then you go in and you seat it or whatever, and then the thing goes down. I guess you get levitated, I'm not sure, and then you disappear, right? And they're gone. Gone for the whole show. So he comes out from the, I guess whatever you want to call it, the theater lobby, and I'm like, where the hell did you go? Like, tell me about it. Like, talk to me about it. He's like, and he was kind of like weirded out. He's like, let's go. Let's like, can we talk about it in the car? And I'm not quite sure how it works, but like, anyways, he didn't want to talk about it. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, the NDA is pretty lock solid.
Yeah.
I think you could find a copy of it on The Smoking Gun, I think. That would have been the same tour I worked. That was at Night of Intimate Illusion, or an Intimate Night of Illusion.
Yeah.
He toured with that show for a while.
That's when he was, his hair slowly transitioned.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, have you ever seen him backstage with a different hairstyle?
Oh, yeah, no. I was going to say, because it was the first show that I worked, I got a little hazed during it. As an apprentice, I was, load in. I was on electrics, so I was running a lot of cable for the lighting. Yeah. 4 18-wheelers, by the way, is what these guys traveled with domestically. But then for the actual show, the prediction he did right before, where he's like tossing frisbees or balls out to get numbers. My job is to be in the audience with a shotgun mic running up and down the aisles. They were great. I had to stay in the aisle, and if I just pointed it at him, if they were 20 feet away, I was picking them up crystal clear.
Yeah.
For the second half of the show, I didn't have much to do, so I would just be backstage.
That's interesting to kind of have that job, right?
Oh, yeah. It was, I mean, after that, it was, everything was pretty tame compared to, here's the tour, here's the national tour of Rent. Big deal.
Did you do anything before that? Like, did you do any other shows before you did Copperfield, or?
Well, no, I mean, I was kind of like the go-to tech guy at my high school, like had tech experience, but it was my stepmother ran a theater, performing arts center, like one of those big ones that gets national touring shows, but it was in the middle of a high school.
Ah, okay.
They had a thing with the theater department where, the crew kids could do an apprenticeship with IATSE as long as they were like 16, and those hours would actually go towards, when they got out of high school, if they wanted to continue with it, they could keep those hours and stay in the union and start moving towards journeyman.
Yeah.
And I was at a different high school, but pulled some strings, and that was the first professional gig I ever did. Super intimidating, and I think laid out for 2 days afterwards because I was 15 scrawny and had never lifted that much in my entire life before. It was the most manual labor I had ever done.
Yeah.
And just barely able to walk to school the next 2 days. But it was a lot of fun. I did, but going back, there's something where Copperfield had to come off really quick.
Yeah.
And the guy who was above me was like, oh, he's got to come off. You got to stand here so you're not in his way, putting me directly in his way. So I turn around and I look back, and Copperfield just blows just right through me. I was of course, I was in his way. And then my site lead is just dying.
Yeah. Yeah, I have questions about it, but we won't talk about it on here because I don't want this to get in the ears of someone. Yeah, I mean, the Copperfield thing is really interesting. A buddy of mine always talk about, we call it Marlowe syndrome. Marlowe had a hairpiece towards the end of his... I'm not going to flat out say it, but I'm just going to say it's funny to see him on tour with hair plugs and then a receding hairline. And then a couple of years later pop up with a full set of hair. So...
Yeah. I mean, he's probably got enough money. Somebody could show up at our doors tomorrow and be like, Copperfield needs your hair. Here's $3.5 million.
Yeah.
Be like, well, I mean, he can buy an island. I guess he can buy my hair.
Yeah.
So
So you like punk rock music, right?
Yes.
You like all music, right?
As somebody who studied music, yeah, I've got to like it all. But yeah, punk's usually the genre that I fall into the most, and what I played in bands, and, playing.
Yeah. Thank you for not going down the path of Dan Sperry and getting extra hardcore with your magic and stuff.
I think the denim jacket is about as far as I go on that.
Yeah.
The stand-up I've done hasn't really been in traditional environments. I would do house shows or art shows.
Yeah, but the clip I've seen, it's great. The egg, the silken egg, even that is just, that plays very well. It's so good.
Yeah, and that's a great bar too, Freddy's in Brooklyn. But yeah, it was a friend's art show. I was like, man, all these Brooklyn native and Manhattan native. My buddy John was one of them. I was like, poetry readings, and some people are going to play music. Yeah. I'm like, how's this going to hold up? And I get off stage, somebody shouts out that Tom Hanks has COVID. We're canceling our flights to Spain, but these artists are coming up and being like, that was awesome. If I have another opening or another gallery show, would you like to do it? So I'm simultaneously booking shows that I know are never going to happen.
So now you have to fly back up there and do these shows. You've already promised.
Yeah. Well, I found out Amtrak's not too pricey, so I kind of like that.
It's setting.
Yeah, and a lot of comedy clubs have that kind of feel to it too. Because I always thought it'd be really funny because I played a lot of basement shows in that whole circuit of DIY punk and stuff. I always thought it'd be really fun to have a basement show with a bunch of people standing around in flannel and smoking Marlboro 27s, but everybody performing as a magician in some god awful out of code Long Island basement with no work room.
Yeah. That's about right. That sounds like a good time to me. And that's the whole thing is with the podcast too, at first it was have an old school feel, but now it's starting to feel like I'm starting to be influenced more by the things around me. And you being a member of the soon to be defunct community, it was one of those things where it was I wasn't able to focus on solely the podcast. It was there, but it wasn't I had to build it up. You know what I'm saying? I had to build it up to the point of where, and doing so, I found that a lot of it is like jazz inspired. Like I love jazz music, so a lot of it is jazz inspired, which was the vision for it to begin with. But now I'm feeling like a little bit more DIY, like a little more like grungy punk rockish and things like that. Yeah. Streetwear-ish kind of. And it's really strange because those are all things I'm interested in. And like my wife was telling me the other day, she's like, stop trying to push something that you think everyone else is going to like. The bottom line is be authentic and be yourself and do it that way. It's amazing to me to see you literally, because I know you obviously off of the podcast and somewhat privately, but it seems like when you perform, you are you. You're not Marc Maret, the magician. You know, here he is, everybody. And like, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't glorify it, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, you know, I'm just some guy. But yeah, it's and I think it helps too, because I think a lot of what you see in, especially like the, you know, amateur magic, which is, you know, what I consider myself. It's not what I do full time. Yeah, you know, that would be the dream. Yeah. But you hear that old like comedian criticism of magicians where it's like, oh, you know, you could just go buy the trick and like do it that night. And, you know, with the script and everything. And in an art form where you see like a lot of kind of just like repetition of the same themes or like even like cut and paste. Just being able to like go, oh, you know, how would I do this if like this is just what I was doing really helps in helping with like original scripting and, you know, even in the joke writing process that goes into a lot. So I don't have anything that's like too serious or anything. Yeah. Even my grandest dreams for like a 45-minute or hour long like close-up parlor show wouldn't exactly be a very like serious thing. Yeah. At least, you know, not all the way.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, just kind of taking that like ethos from music and all those things I was doing and even like film school, just kind of like, all right, well, I have to make a movie for a grade. It has to be on 16 millimeter film. It's going to cost me $1,500 and all of that money is going to go to film. How can I, you know, make the rest of the movie with $0? Yeah. A lot of that just like, how can I do this with the least amount of available monetary resources? Yeah. You know, how you can create with very little. Yeah.
When I was in high school, I absolutely loved film. I did a documentary. I still love film, but I did a documentary about me doing magic. And so I had like my family talking about like, you know, Benjamin started doing magic when he was da-da-da-da-da-da. And it was just great because one of the things about it, and it sounds silly now because obviously I'm an adult, but it's interesting because my biggest influences was the Dan and Dave videos. So getting these really black and white shots and like have my family talk, like very noir, you know, vignette and just black and white. And I won, you know, we had a competition and I had won first place only because of the shots. Like the content was shit. Like it was like my step siblings talking about, I don't know, like I guess he does magic. I don't know. He never does it for us. But the shots were really well done. Like I really used the grid to really understand where to place people, and which helps a lot. But I got accepted into the New York School of Film. I turned it down because it's expensive.
Yeah. And it turns out not a degree, a certificate. Yeah, a very
exactly
certificate. And then come to find out the degree wasn't worth shit anyway. So, yeah. Drop $150K at the AFI, the MFA program. Yeah, no. I don't want to be like a character. You know, I know that, especially with like Marc Maret is not my government name. It's my stage, you know, it's a stage name.
Wow. I've been saying your last name all wrong this whole time. Ever since
that's fine. It's French. It's fine.
I just assumed like Marc Maret. Like, who's the guy? The other guy? Marc.
It's probably Marc Maret. Or,
is that his last name, Marc Maret? I don't know.
Probably
the other mustache guy, you know. Is your parents French? Like they come from France?
My mother's last name was Maret, and I won't go into my government name, but it's hard to pronounce and it's a very silly looking name. If you dig around on my Instagram, I think I tag, because I have my regular civilian account too, which I originally ported some videos over from to start it.
Oh, I didn't even know you had a separate account. So there's that, everybody. Yeah. We'll leave it in the link below.
I'm a stories guy over there. I don't think I posted anything since like November.
Yeah.
And a lot of, if you could just go, it's like, well, that's just all the magic from the Maret Magic account.
Yeah. What's your thoughts about Instagram magic?
I think there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad. I think it's great that there's so many people out there doing stuff and putting things out there that, you know, we might not have really seen or like really had to dig around in like clubs, or there's never really been an online place for magicians to really gather like that, like the cafe, I guess, but that has its own kind of like politics and things, and there's no video, obviously. Any video there is a link to YouTube, and there's different, Theory 11 has forums, which I don't know if any active posters on there. Even when you buy from Penguin, there's the discussion tab and it's usually empty. So it is cool that there's like a place to kind of see the like-minded stuff. Of course, there's obviously a lot of really bad magic on there, which I think is kind of fine, because I'm pretty sure if you're not seeking it out, you're not going to see it. Like, I don't think a lot of the lay public is going to stumble across it unless they end up following someone like Justin Willman's Netflix show or something. But I think even like my explore pages, despite all of my hashtags being like magic and stuff, it's still a fairly new account. It hasn't really figured me out yet. So it's just like a hodgepodge of like designer like leather boots and burlesque performers and like guitarists and piano players and stuff like that. Still hasn't picked up. So
algorithm,
but I also think I think a lot of people have a lot of good sense to or I hope most people have good sense to kind of figure out what's what's good, what's mediocre, and like if it's a kid doing something, it'll be something to look back on and go, oh, look how much I've grown from this. It would be nicer if there was a little more discussion rather than just like, oh, you're smooth, clean, the typical comments.
100s.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think magicians should be posting on Instagram? Like for me, I'm stuck in the middle. Me and my mentor go back and forth, and my mentor's a little bit older than me, but we go back and forth, and I told him that like I don't think as a card guy or as magic in general should be posted on Instagram. But now I'm kind of realizing that like, fuck it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Or at least make like a lot of people do, like a faux account where it's like faux because I'm fancy. I don't know, fake account, just like fake account. But it's you, right? And just like do a different name. Like, I played with a couple of ideas and then I deleted the account because I was like, no.
It's interesting because a lot of the guys who have been out there and performing for years and are professionals or at least semi-professional and stuff, like they don't have to post because they're out there working. I don't post any of my working material. If it's a video, it's like something I'm working on or like a little side idea of something that like I wouldn't be able to, not that I wouldn't be able to do live, but like probably something I wouldn't do live. My whole thing was I started it at the beginning of the pandemic, and if I want to eventually start booking shows, my next 4 shows just got canceled. So what could have been a sizzle reel is now 2 or 3 shows worth of stuff, and then other shows that didn't get filmed at all. It was kind of more like a proof of concept that like if I was seeking out a client and they want to go beyond the website or whatever and see, there is at least like, okay, this guy can do what he says he does. Ideally, you're in a place where it's promotional and you can post pictures from performances and stuff. But obviously, again, also not everybody's a professional and going out there to do shows. I think as long as people maybe step back and go, maybe I shoot this a couple more times, because it's completely different stuff that I could do pretty like not flawlessly, but pretty well in person. You got to film a bunch of times because the camera is completely unforgiving. It's a completely different performance, and you completely lose misdirection. I was watching back the show I did do, the virtual show I did recently. I do my take on Larry Jennings' chop cup routine, and I was like, oh, there's definitely some things that in live performance would have been fine, but hopefully nobody caught it this time around. Of course, it's, I'm looking for every little thing.
Yeah. Are you finding with the virtual stuff that exactly is hard for in real life situations on virtual, where it could have been like easily played off like, oh, and go and do something else, and now you're kind of like, oh shit, they're watching me.
That was definitely, I had kind of the luck that I was able to do like 3 dress rehearsals with 3 different, like the first one, which was pretty god awful because I had 2 cameras. My girlfriend was operating in another room, switching cameras and moderating Zoom for the first time. She's never done that before. By the time I got to the actual performance, I was pretty good. And, by the time I was done, it wasn't until I watched it back that I was able to really catch stuff. But, I got thrown for loops in other ways. I didn't know there were going to be kids present, and all my volunteers were kids.
How'd that happen?
That was I think.
Like a miscommunication thing? Or
a miscommunication, because in talking to the client, is a good friend and an old regular of mine.
Right.
She was talking about doing a thing with her colleagues and friends, but like coordinating kids. And I had just kind of been like, oh yeah, like when the kids go to bed. It was totally fine. You see a lot like of discussion that like, oh, kids these days don't know what playing cards are. And these kids were calling back the cards they had picked like no problem,
really?
Like the difference between clubs and spades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I also think maybe, because we're in a quarantine, your parents running out of things to do have probably resorted to teaching their kids simple card games.
Yeah, that's true too.
There's always that like, oh, the kids these days don't remember this. And kids are like, yeah I do.
Yeah.
They might not, kids probably aren't playing rummy and gin and spit and stuff like that. Like I knew the games were played like summer camp and stuff like that. Maybe not as frequently as they used to, but kids still know cards. I was able to switch things up a little bit, to make it a little more easy to follow for them. Just like slowing down a little bit and like really making sure that they were able to do stuff. And this I really wish this one kid, he helped me during a triumph that I was doing, and the reaction from him when the deck writes itself was just like, I'm like, God, I can't wait to see his reaction played back, and the way that Zoom recorded it did not capture it. I was like, I need this kid at every show to just be my hype guy.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I have this conversation with buddies of mine about pretty much doing magic for kids. So I think there's a difference. There's doing magic for kids, and then there's kids magic. When there are kids in your show, do you find that like you're doing magic for kids, or are you doing kids magic? Like, do you end up switching? Do you know what I'm saying?
I still do the same kind of, the few times I've had to perform to kids, like I still end up doing the same magic I'm doing, just maybe the demeanor in which I'm doing it. And like, the way I talk about what I'm doing changes a little bit, because kids are smart.
Yeah. Of course,
and, they get it. Yeah. It's I don't really have any desire to pick up like a dove pan or anything like that, or stuff that's like associated stuff, with the standard stuff. That's a completely different skill set that I do not have. Like the guy just do like kids magic, like that's a completely different level. The few things I've like delved into, like just in case to retail a show a little bit. Yeah. Like it's just a completely different line of thinking. And those guys have to be so quick and like ready for anything. Yeah. It would be more like, what I do is more like, pivoting suddenly to like a family show where like, I still want to entertain adults too.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. And, I've thought about a few things that like what, you can ring in and stuff like that, but also with like some of the class, like silk tag. I didn't do silk tag in my virtual show, but like
that's one of the best versions I've seen of that. I don't know if I said that to you. Yeah, because it's just the delivery of the whole thing. Like obviously, I think for magicians who are listening and those who perform it, we all know what silk tag is, right? But the way you do it just the whole way you present it, right? Which is a great discussion on like. You could be doing shit magic, and the only reason why it's shit magic is because it's really the magician who's doing, like, is not a very good performer, right? Like, that's a conversation we can go into, like, forever. But I think it's interesting because Silk to Egg is one of those tricks that's like, I think it should be in a magic kit. It used to come in old magic kits. I know that.
It really is a masterclass on misdirection because, the few, like, sneaky things you have to do in there, I added it to that stand-up set like maybe a week or two before that show actually happened. I knew the trick well. I just didn't have the prop.
Right.
That switch, I was looking at like Pop Hayden and a few like the switch that comes like with the instructions isn't necessarily great, like all of that. But I was like pulling from all these different resources and just seeing like the biggest change I've seen to the routine is actually Eric Tate's. He's got one on his like most recent Penguin lecture. His goes off in like this incredible, like crazy different direction.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's really cool. It's really fun to watch. Like his thinking on it is so great, and it like really like takes it to a new place that I don't think it's been done before. Even though it's the same routine, pulling every video I could of performing it and going, how are they handling this and what are they doing?
How's it being presented? And what do you take from it?
You're kind of handed a great presentation to go with it because it is, you don't want to play it too much as a sucker trick. But I think what's helpful is like that idea that you're letting them in on a secret. In that video, especially, like you're doing the sucker trick and everyone's like, oh my God, you could hear the gasping. And I'm like, now I'm going to blow the secret to it, which is, a great hit too. Because, people don't feel too cheated. And then, the climax of it just is great. And it's a class on its own of misdirection. And
the ending to yours is great because everyone's like, okay, big deal. And you're like, but wait. And you crack it and you open it. And I'm like, it's so good because everyone in the audience is like, oh, like, how is that possible? And like, as magicians, we know that's not an elementary trick. It takes a lot to get the misdirection down and do it well enough for people not to be like, oh, he switched pockets, or like, oh, he topped it. Like he just kind of, but that was, it was really good the way you did it.
Especially doing it in bars too, having that like last quarter of my beer left. So I have that whole beat of trying to like, because I was like, I'm not going to crack this into an egg that I just beer I paid like $6 of my life. I'm going to get my money's worth on this beer, but it's also that built-in beat between taking the hole off and then cracking the egg, because it's fun listening to it. 'Cause you could kind of hear like the audience doesn't quite know where it's going. Like they know the hole was fake, but they don't know what the climax is going to be.
Right.
Starting to piece it together, but you have just enough time that you hit them before they finally kind of piece together where it's going. Yeah.
And again, like you said, that whole breakup is great because for a second too, I was like, I almost missed when you go from the segue from that to drinking it. But then I realized, oh, okay, I got it. And then you cracked it. And I was like, the whole breakup is like, it's like one of those moments where you after you do a card move and you move the box out of the way as like a subtlety of getting into the next piece of whatever you're going to do, as like to break it up. It's an optical, like he didn't do anything. He just moved the card box is all they saw. So
because I mean, obviously the routine ends the same for a lot of people, but a lot of people who do it in, I think the way that, is just to have an empty glass there. And it's like, well, it's unless you're using it for something else, it might not be very motivating.
Right.
But context of where I'm performing, having a glass of beer on stage with me is kind of par for the course.
It was genius. It was good. It was good. For those who are listening, I highly advise that you go check it out. Is it still on your Instagram? Where was it?
It's on Instagram. It's on my grid, but it's like an IGTV thing. If you look for the really blue video.
Okay, yeah. I'll link it. I'll put your Instagram information in the show notes so everyone can kind of click on it and check it out. So Doc Easton, I know you said you like Doc Easton, you're into his magic.
Yeah.
I have a few other things we'll discuss and then we'll break out. What are your thoughts on the current state of magic? Like I know that's a big topic right now for many different reasons.
I think it's interesting. I think, especially with COVID and the quarantine and, this big transition to virtual, I think we're kind of finally in a space where every magician is finally now aware of every other magician. We are more aware of the magic that's being performed and put out online than I think ever before, really. With Instagram, there's so many ways to meet people and, find like-minded people online. It's probably this, a young person logging on and searching the like card magic hashtag, very similar way that people felt, walking into their first convention. I've never been to a convention, so I wouldn't know that feeling. But that kind of like, oh, there's this whole world there. But at the same time, I think a lot of us who've been doing it for a while and people who've been doing it longer than us are like, you can't not be aware of almost like everything that's going on within the community.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of people, I think, especially within our age group, kind of refinding the old stuff again.
Senior citizens, 80, between 80 and 85, right.
Seeking out books that still, borrow a hat pin and an opera hang.
I think you're right, though. Lately, I've been getting the rap of kind of being, like an asshole, and I'm okay with that. With magic. But I think the biggest thing for me, though, is that it would be different if people were searching hashtag card magic on Instagram and great quality stuff was coming up.
Right.
But instead, people are searching hashtag card magic or whatever. And there's some good stuff on there, right? But there's also a lot of shit. I mean, I'm not going to cut corners and find a nice way to say it.
You got to like find the story of the guy who's going to recommend you to the friend who like does excellent card work, but like nobody knows them, so they're not going to get on that. You know, they're not going to be at the top of that algorithm.
Yeah. What would your advice be? Like if you, because you said you've never been to a convention before, and 2018 was my very first convention. And looking back on it now, my personal experience, because of the lineup of people that were there, it was great. It was amazing, right? Sessioning was great, on point. There were people who I'll never meet again in my life. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
What would your advice be for those who kind of are on Instagram or wanting to go on Instagram and look up like sleight of hand with cards or card magic? Or maybe you don't have advice on it because it's something that you're going through as well, but how do you weave through?
I think the best advice, just because like if you're really into it and you're really looking for the best stuff, you will find it.
Yeah.
If you're going to be pouring through it, you're going to find it eventually. I think the best advice is just like, don't take that first chunk that you see as like, just because it's at the top of the algorithm, you know, understand that that's completely, that works completely differently than, you know, how it gets elevated. Like, dig a little bit deeper, you know, go through the comments, go through mentions, like like if you find something you think is really good, like try to, you know, parse out where that came from, or maybe, you know, following the people that you think are good and then continue and like keep going through, because eventually you will find that good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, especially now with, you know, there are some like great guys with a ton of traction, you know, Andrew Frost. And like he's in his stories all the time, you know, recommending guys, you know, like recommending guys like, you know, Disgruntled Puffin or Sam the Bellhop or any of these guys who like do really good card magic, but maybe aren't promoted by the algorithm as much. You know, like when you find the good stuff, pay attention to who those creators are pushing you towards, or who they're recommending, and then, you know, keep going from there. And, you know, you'll end up finding some, you know, insane worker who just does it for fun, but has, you know, beautiful takes on classic moves. And you'll find it eventually. You parse through the bullshit, and eventually you'll find some good stuff. I mean, I can't give any advice for how to game the algorithm or build a following or anything like that. But, you know, if you want to put magic, just be a little critical of yourself. And, you know, if you think it's great, if you think you got it, film it 10 more times, or, you know, like keep going. In film, it's always like, that was a perfect take. We have to do one more for safety. Always have to do one for safety. So it's like, when you think you've got it, just do a couple more. And then if you find yourself falling, if you find yourself like, you're like really going back to, you know, not as good as that take, then just step back for a moment. Then you're overexerting yourself. So I mean, that's the best advice I could get as somebody who, it's not my goal to have, you know, a huge Instagram following or anything like that. Like I said, it's more calling card. I
mean, I think it's interesting to see magicians kind of, that's their bread and butter, is the lights and the hearts, which I'm not going to go into the science on it and the psychology on it, because I've read and seen too many documentaries on it. But I think, you know, that false reassertion of what I'm putting out is good enough, I think it's counterproductive to the magic world in general, because that also gives off the false image of, as a magician, when you go on Instagram, this is what you're supposed to do. Right.
Well, there's also that, you know, if you're doing something and if you're doing a triumph, you know, that one you get for, you know, that one video of it, the idea is to like keep doing it past that. And, you know, with Instagram, you're not going to keep posting the same routine over and over again, because you're not going to reach a different audience. Whereas, you know, if you're going out and like, even if it's just for friends here and there, and like they're different friends, like even if you're just doing it for that, like it's a completely different way of looking at it. Whereas like, you know, just doing it for that one video, like hopefully you're going through and going like, okay, it's great to do that, because then in 10 years you could look back and go, oh wow, I was doing this way, or this could have been better here, or oh, I forgot I did that move here. I should put that back in because I completely forgot about it. It's great. There's definitely merits to it, but in order to really game the algorithm, you got to be putting out stuff constantly.
And the algorithm has changed. Doug Kahn he went from 0% on social media to blowing the fuck up on TikTok. I mean, I remember mid-quarantine, maybe, I would sit there and he was doing like the Michael Skinner thing, where it's like he would go on for 4 nights in a row, and every night you watched, it would be completely different magic. None of it would be the same. And
Right.
I was like, I have to see how this is gonna go. And this is the beginning when he started to like hack the algorithm, and he really got it, and he just naturally went out there. And there was like 1,000, maybe 2,000 people watching him one night. And I sat there and thought to myself, because he performs in the French Quarters down in New Orleans, so like he's used to the busking and the crowds, right? But 1,000 to 2,000 people, that's like a small stadium. Or a decent sized stadium, a big stadium.
And that's huge for just a live that, you know, somebody, because I browse TikTok every now and then, but as soon as I see live, I'm like, scroll right past that. Don't need
I fall right into the TikTok thing. That's like my decompression at night. My wife absolutely hates it. It's like, I get sucked into TikTok, and it's like, because it's just so funny. And now the algorithm has caught on to what I like and what I don't like. So it's like, some of it is magic. Some of it is like really funny jokes and stuff. And like my daughter, she's on TikTok, and she'll be like, did you see this TikTok? Did you see that? So it's really funny to see that's her generation of like going on and doing the dances and all this other stuff. It's funny. It's like short form TV.
Right.
It's interesting because like I've thought about trying to figure out how to get the podcast on TikTok, and it's a new thing. Like I went to this whole web conference about podcasting and everything. It's apparently like the largest virtual podcasting conference. And one of the things I talked about is TikTok is you're missing an opportunity on TikTok because the algorithm, the expectation for the algorithm is so small right now that I could put up the dumbest card trick, right? And if people like it, it's going to fucking blow up. That's the way it works. It's really viewer driven. It's not about what TikTok thinks should be blown up.
Yeah, that's, you know, I recently switched over because I just had it to browse through, and I think I posted a few like non-magic, because I really like doing Vine back in the day, so it was just a vehicle for short form comedy. Each time I post a video, none of them have done well, but I can watch counts go up. Like, you know, I think I just put up a version of the Alex Hansford color change that I've been working on. I got like 660 views, 5 likes. You know? But, you know, I'm also my own worst critic in a lot of ways. And it's like, I don't want to just put something up for the sake of putting it up. I want it to be something that I've worked on and am happy with, which doesn't necessarily always equate to, you know, really winning in the algorithmic game. But, you know, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the interesting thing, right? Is like, for instance, I'll give you a little behind the scenes on stuff. So when I post something in the stories on the podcast page, I only have 100 and something followers, true followers. Like I'm talking about people who like listen to the podcast, and the numbers reflect that. Here's the thing though, is that on my last episode I put up on Martin Nash, right? And this is all conversion numbers. Like if you're a business person, figure it out, email us, let me know, because I'd like to know. But the last episode I put up, I'll put up an episode and I give it about like 12 hours to see if people are going to actually like listen or whatever. And this episode I last put up is the second highest listened episode so far. The first one is the Magic is Parallel to Science. And that one probably got over 300 listens.
Oh, nice.
Right? So this one is right behind it at 200 and something. I could see who's listening, like not who specifically, but I can see like where and everything. And but then when I post something on Instagram where I know people are following, the numbers don't match up, right? Because I'll post something on Instagram and get like 80 to 100 views, which to me is like, oh, thank you so much. Like, I appreciate it. Thanks for viewing it. But I did a Twitter space and I probably had 30 people in there listening to me talk, which Twitter space is like the Twitter's version of Clubhouse or whatever. I've been beta testing it for a couple months now. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. It's one of those things where I'm just like, okay, so clearly Instagram is kind of good. I don't know who's pushing my podcast through my website, or maybe it's just, I'm not quite sure.
Right.
The numbers are there, and it's not like robots listening to it. There's only one person that's in like France, but that's where the hosting site is based out of. So it's like, like you get that one listen. Congratulations. I mean, and that's wild. So to think about that, right? You have that many people listening to something or viewing your live or whatever it is. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Like Clubhouse, you could have 1,000 people in your Clubhouse. That's a stadium listening to you talk. It's wild to me.
Clubhouse finally solves the problem of remember somebody saying that, like, when you're listening to a podcast and the two hosts don't know the answer to something, but you do know it, it's the closest you can get to feeling like a ghost.
Yeah.
Where you just want to be like, well, and like Clubhouse solve that issue because you could immediately chime in and be like, I know the answer to that weird piece of trivia you're trying to remember, instead of like listening to people try to like remember something.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting the way all of this works now, and how the metrics work and how they're getting skewed into what, and just putting out as much as possible to, it'll eventually just bolster your numbers.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely a merit to reaching a wider, like, you don't want to get too caught up on the likes and the comments and stuff like that. But at least knowing that you're reaching an audience, I think is, probably the thing you want to shoot for more. If you see the views are higher than the likes, and you've still reached somebody, and they've played it long enough to count it as a view. They didn't get to the point where whatever machine is going, okay, well they only watched for 5.5 seconds, so we're not going to count that one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how Magic is going on social media. I think what's even more interesting is the translation from, at least during quarantine, social media magicians going onto a show like Penn and Teller Fool Us.
Right.
Which I don't know if it's just me, but like this past quarantine and this last season just seems like there's a lot of magicians who are on Instagram who happen to go on Fool Us. I stopped watching Fool Us after Johnny Thompson died. I personally chose to stop watching it because I knew the filtration of magic that was going to be on the show moving forward was going to be much different. And I have friends who studied with Johnny Thompson. So it's one of those things where they, as a personal loyalty to Johnny Thompson as a student, they were like, we're done watching Fool Us, because it's a much different tone to it now. What are your thoughts on Fool Us? Because I'm finding, me personally, the way I see it, and from buddies of mine when we discuss it, is that Fool Us is the new Magic Castle. If you're able to perform on Fool Us, you've made it.
Exactly.
Right? Where I'm still in the mindset that if you perform at the Magic Castle, you've made it, right? Regardless of the politics. Yeah. We're not going to get into the politics, but
one of the coolest things with the season that they filmed in quarantine, there's now all these, like, some of the most mind-blowing magic this season are from people in like the Netherlands, Europe, Asia, South America, who would have never been able to, your first performance, you got to pay your way there. If you get picked, they only fly you out if you win and you're going to perform for their show.
Yeah.
So it's opened up to, a more like kind of worldwide and like a more amateur audience. But some of the most mind-blowing stuff is the stuff that's like videoed in. There's, I forget her name. There's a woman who does this like great routine with like bubbles and a kid, and it's a manipulation act. And it is so good. It's like mind-blowing how good it is.
Yeah.
And the stuff that's kind of done in studio, the people who are, either local or willing to travel during this, I think it's actually been a little bit weaker.
Yeah.
But you're seeing this like incredible like international talent who would have never been able to be on the show before.
Right.
Simply because it's cost prohibitive to fly from anywhere in the world to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Some really astounding stuff.
Yeah.
Some of it too is just like kind of standard like box illusion things, but I've been enthralled with the people being videoed in, and because a lot of the people coming who are in Vegas like on stage doing it are, just kind of doing card tricks.
Yeah. Which
is fine. There's been some great card work on the show over the years, but some of it is, it's. You can't fault them for, some people just want to go on. That's the mindset you have to have going on that show is it's not about fooling them. It's you're getting an opportunity to go on probably the best Magic TV show currently on the air.
Yeah. Yeah. Masters of Illusions kind of filled the void for a bit, and then Penn and Teller popped up, and I think they're filling that void now.
Yeah.
There's nothing like World's Greatest Magic. I wish that was still around.
I wish they played it more. I mean, who knows who has the rights to it, right, or like who can rebroadcast it when or whatever. But just going like anytime if I'm on YouTube and I see like, oh wait, that was, who was it? The guy who does the pickpocket routine, not Apollo Robbins, like the older guy. Like that's just such a fun. Like I remember watching that.
Yeah.
There's just so much good magic.
Do you remember World's Weirdest or World's Craziest Magic? It was another one of those specials that they did, but it was like really crazy zany stuff. So it was like Sylvester the Jester,
Yeah, I think because I remember especially coming back in being like, Dan Sylvester looks familiar. Like I remember, like it's not that he was somebody that like I would have remembered as a kid or anything like that. But coming back, I'm like, oh, I remember that. I remember that guy.
Back to normal. Yeah. Who's the other one? Cohen and Company? I could be messing it up, but they had this great routine. It was like a Carl Ballantine sort of thing, like not really magic and just like slapstick. It was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, anytime there was a magic special on TV when I was a kid, I would watch it. Like Masked Magician, Secrets Revealed, whatever. Like Ripley's Believe. Oh, what the Masked Magician stuff? Oh man, I think we watched those like recently. It's so funny because a lot of it was like not stuff people were doing anymore. Like obviously it's like
they did a newer season. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Oh, I think I didn't watch it.
They did a newer season when Chris Angel was the hot ticket, and they were doing all of Chris Angel's stuff. So it was like it was like going into a coffin box and pushing it through the shredder, like how that goes on, and walking through a piece of glass and all this other shit. Like everything Chris Angel was doing was pretty much on there. I thought that was really it was funny. Like a fuck you to Chris Angel. So I have we'll do a fun little, this is new, I'm not quite sure how to lay it out, but I have some questions here, magic related and non-magic related. You can skip them or not skip them, and we'll just go with it. I don't know. So there's that.
Great.
Top 5 bands to listen to.
Okay. Promise Ring, Los Campesinos, Minutemen, Stars, and Sleater-Kinney.
I've heard of none of those. So what genres are they? Are they all punk rock? Are they
punk and kind of like synthwave stuff, or like late 80s, early 90s kind of emo things? But yeah, there's some really good stuff. I think Los Campesinos is probably my favorite. I've seen them and Stars the most. Stars is more, they're like Canadian synth pop, very melodic, and great dueling vocals.
I'll listen to it. I'll leave links in the show notes. Are these like can I link them in the show notes? Like how do they have websites? Yeah,
I think Minutemen, they're from the 80s and were like a band for 3 years before their singer died, but you can find them. They're kind of, their big album is like, I think it's like an hour and 20 long, and it's like 47 songs. Okay. So it's like that classic, but really cool genre blending. It's like, it's punk, but there's like, jazz fusion in there and a lot of different influences. It's cool stuff.
What is something you hate but you wished you loved?
Potato salad.
Okay.
I grew up in a Polish family with a lot of different like.
Pierogies is my favorite food.
Really?
It's like top 5 for me.
I like everything about it, and the second I taste it, I just can't get into it for some reason. Like I don't have any problem with macaroni salad, coleslaw, anything like that, but potato salad. And I've had it at like the best barbecue joints in the South. I always try it, and I think I was scarred because when I was 5, my grandmother made it. Her like famous potato salad, and it was very important that I eat the portion that was given to me. Yeah. But what nobody knew was that she had accidentally bought Miracle Whip instead of mayonnaise. So that is kind of burned into my mind forever.
So you probably don't eat Miracle Whip either.
No.
Oh, that'll do it. My wife's got, like for me, I grew up in an Italian household. So like anything that was put in front of me, like you didn't have to eat it, but like we suggest you try it because it's delicious, right? So it's like my grandmother, who came from Serrano, Italy, she like the whole animal was like on our dinner table, and it was just like a bit much. But like to this day, I get the nickname the tank, not tank like big, but like tank. Well, that too, but like the iron stomach. That's what they would call me.
Oh yeah.
Because I could eat everything. My family wanted me to go on Fear Factor for like the longest time. It doesn't gross me out. It's just like
it's funny because I will eat literally anything, and I will eat and try potato salad, but I really want to like it because it's such a staple.
Yeah.
And there's great recipes out there.
I think it's also like part of like my younger like punk rock days, like emo days, where I was like, I'll fucking do that, like whatever, like I'll fucking eat it. Just give it to me, I'll eat it. Like eating cigarettes for no reason was probably not a good idea. Like it's gross.
No, not at all.
I'm not Tom Mullica, so there's that. What weird food combination do you really enjoy?
Oh, hang on. I've got a few of these.
What's two of them?
So when I was in high school, I dated this girl who was like, you have to try this thing. And it's Jack's cheese curls, specifically Jack's brand cheese curls. Okay. They're crunchier, and chocolate ice cream.
What? And I like
it's
a
really
Wendy's
weird.
effect, like French fries and the.
It very much is. Yeah. Yeah, there were a few others. I always tried to like I would try to like bring those into like inspiration for cocktails. Like I think I ate like
What a weird segue that is, going from that and then.
I ate a chocolate cookie at a party once and immediately moved over to like a Thai chili hummus or something. I was like, oh, the Thai chili and the chocolate works really well together.
You could do shavings of chocolate or shavings of interesting
Thai chili, yeah. But it was specifically the hummus was the weird thing in there. But I was like, well, I didn't eat them together, but I ate them close enough together. I was like, that's kind of weird, but also not bad.
Yeah. I love food combinations like that, right? Where it's like, we'll go out to like, I call them fufu shishi restaurants because they're like very fancy and the plates are really tiny, like tapas. And like, the sauce is really just a spoonful, like a snuff spoon and like a smear on the plate. And I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do with this? But it's interesting because there's some restaurants here in Atlanta that specifically do that because it's a flavor buildup until like the big plate, right? Which I fall in love with that I'm a sucker for it because it's like you get the salt taste and then the spicy and the sweet and then finally they give you this big fucking steak to share with two people and the flavor's through the roof because you can now, all your taste buds are like activated, right? So it's like, it's amazing. I have a lot of things that I can brag about, but brag to me about the best things going on in the past 30 days.
Best things going on in the past 30 days. Oh,
so what is that?
Well, it's tough because I haven't been doing much.
Yeah, quarantine edition.
Yeah.
Like wearing pants.
It's let's see. I guess. Well, I had my show. I had a a private paid show that I did that went really well. I might do public. I don't know. I might just. I mean, I've been weighing the virtual thing. I might just continue to focus on working out different. Different combinations for different performances IRL, back out in the world. But maybe we'll see. Haven't had much going on. Trying to think.
You moved. That's a pretty
yeah. I mean, that was
in the middle of a pandemic. You're winning.
Yeah,
you're winning, right? Like people are suffering.
Yeah.
Do we brag about that? I don't know.
We managed to hire the best moving company for the job. These two guys like loaded out our entire apartment in like 45 minutes and loaded in our new apartment. Like, we were on the 4th floor in Brooklyn, but we had an elevator, and we're on the 2nd floor here, but no elevator. Oh, there we go. I walk upstairs more, so like I'm really building those strong legs.
Yeah, there you go.
So anytime anywhere we walk is uphill. So we're just like really, our calves are just like blowing out.
Yeah. When I first moved out of my parents' place, I moved into, this is my second apartment in this complex. I've been here about like 5 years or so. And yeah, I did live with my parents till my mid-20s. Judge me. And so we lived on the top floor and it was just me, my daughter and my wife, but we were on the top floor and it's 6 floors. So it's like groceries, doing large grocery hauls. I was like, oh my God. Okay. Somehow I've lost more weight living on the bottom floor than I did on the top floor. I don't know how that works out, but.
Well, your body goes into like distress mode after going up all those steps. You have to overcompensate.
Yeah.
Your body thinks you're climbing a mountain.
Exactly.
Yeah. I moved friends from a 5th floor walk up once, and they were, I'm 6 foot and they were both like 5'4". Yeah. So I like a lot of the furniture moving was like, basically I had to front it just being a bigger guy. And
you moved it inside or out?
We were moving them out. So we were going down, but
like, I don't know where you were. 'Cause I know when my sister lived in Harlem, where she was, because I don't think there was an elevator, is my understanding. She had to move her furniture out from the window down.
Oh, no. This was in some friends also in the Flatbush area of Brooklyn. Yeah. So we were able to use the stairs, but 5 flights with 2 sets of stairs for each flight. No, I was like, that's the last time I help a friend move. They got the last one. So
we're going to take a left turn and ask some pretty interesting questions. What do you think is the most unpleasant sounding word?
Unpleasant sounding word. It's not a word, but it is a phrase. And it's the phrase, edited it out.
Ooh,
Like, oh, they edited it out of the. It's just that repetition of like hard D and T. For some reason, it does not flow off the tongue. It sounds wrong to me. That I always try to figure out other ways to construct it, but like, yeah, edited it out. It's that it feels wrong and it doesn't feel correct, even though it totally is. Yeah. And there's correct in language anyway.
Let's combine the moving out and the music together. So if you got stuck in an elevator and were forced to listen to only one song, what song would you pick?
Ooh.
You're moving out, right? You got the furniture and you get stuck in
Yeah, well, not probably not Moving Out, Anthony's song by Billy Joel, but I'm trying to think of a song that I could just like listen to over, which I mean, the Spotify, like, here's what you play on repeat. I'm like, great, I'm just gonna listen to this because it's I would probably say A Praise Chorus by Jimmy Eat World.
That's an oldie.
Just because, you know, yeah, it's an oldie but a goodie. It's kind of anthemic and picks you up, so it'll keep me going while I'm stuck in an elevator, which sounds absolutely horrifying to me.
Would you rather be the most popular kid in school or the smartest kid in school? Because we're in school, apparently.
I would say probably most popular, only because then the only pressure comes from other kids, whereas when you're the smartest, the other kids all hate you and the adults demand too much from you.
Interesting.
I would say so. You're getting hit from two sides. There's less homework if you're the most popular. You know, there's no homework with popularity.
Do you? Yeah, no, that makes sense. I didn't think about it. I mean, I'm sure
I would have absolutely no authority on what it means to be popular in high school.
Do you want a blue card or a black card?
Black card.
Black card? Do you want black card A or black card B?
Let's go A this time.
Okay. If you could ask one magician one question and they had to answer truthfully, who and what would you ask?
That is a good one. Shit. There's can we come back to that one?
If you could have a personal mascot, what would it be?
It would probably like a little raccoon who would ride in a sidecar on a motorcycle, and we would, you know, drive around the country solving mysteries. He would wear little goggles. I think raccoon in a sidecar is just like a sure bet.
Yeah, I love raccoons. It's one of those things where it's like the fact that they look like bandits all the fucking time is pretty badass.
Exactly.
Right? But I think the question would be, would your raccoon have a matching mustache to go?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no. Yeah, definitely.
Would it be curled or simple, just Vernon?
I would say Vernon, okay. Yeah. I don't want to have to pay for a raccoon's like mustache wax, especially if he gets into the good, like really high-end stuff. I don't need that.
Do you want left hand or right hand?
Left hand.
If you have $100,000, $100K, you have to donate or create a charity. What do you do?
Let's see. Well, I've donated to a lot of stuff recently that I've really liked, but 100K would probably go towards. I have some friends who have a charity out of New York called the People's Bodega.
Okay.
Yeah, they got started. They would collect donations of food, and during the protests over the summer, they would feed people and, you know, provide PPE and stuff like that. But then it kind of expanded into you know, providing food for marginalized communities within New York. They also kind of funneled that into a rolling free library where they do a lot of book donations for marginalized communities. There's a completely like decentralized like leadership. It's all just like one group doing their best to provide food and books to people who don't have it. And I think they're doing it really well. You know, we get them another 2 vans or something with that 100. Yeah, it's a great charity.
That's really cool. Send me that link. I'll put it in the show notes too for people to check out also. Last question. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be? That's
tough. Does it have to be a specific food item, or can it be a class of food, like a style of food? I think usually these mean like one food item.
Let me double check. One food for the rest of your life. So I guess like
food item. Yeah. I would have to go cliche, but pizza, only because, you know, it comes in a wide enough variety, and if you really need it, it can be healthy-ish.
Oh yeah.
You could get veggies on your pizza. I was gonna say cheesesteak, but you know, that's that's a coronary waiting to happen.
Yeah.
You can. You don't have to go like the ultra. You could get like a nice thin crust and throw like a ton of like spinach and peppers and mushrooms and stuff on it, and pretend it's healthy at least.
Oh yeah, 100%. So you have this question that you left about asking one magician one question, or do you want to pick one from this crazy green pack?
Let me do the magician one.
Okay.
I feel like I got something in my head.
Okay.
I'm trying to think back to like who we've lost recently who I wouldn't get a chance to meet and like actually ask questions to. I kind of want to rule out the living because there's always the opportunity to maybe eventually meet them. I'm trying to think how to phrase this. I'd love to speak to Jeff Lotta. A lot of the coin work I'm doing. No, it's terrible.
Go with it.
How do you like really make it seem so effortless?
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of video footage of Lotta. There's the New York Coin Magic Symposium. There's the Pink Purse tape. There's a few things here and there, but like when you see it, it is just absolutely, completely effortless magic. And really excited for, I think Minch and Jamie and Swiss are working on his card magic book too.
Yeah.
So hopefully there's some video stuff to go along with that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, just how do you translate that just raw technical skill to also being just completely effortless in your execution?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. I think about that often.
Yeah.
I think for me, me being a big Marlowe guy, I think it's like sitting down with, it would be Marlowe for me, kind of trying to figure out, how can you be such an encyclopedia of card magic? It's just, and there are things that I'm not going to talk about it on here, but there's things that I know about Marlowe that a lot of people understand or realize. But he has a lot more unpublished stuff than he does published, which is insane. Yeah,
because the over of published work is, I've read through like an eighth of revolutionary card technique. It's like I got to step back. I can't take this all.
And you can't with the Marlowe stuff. You can't do it that way.
Reference material. It's
like Steve Reynolds always tells me, you got to take it like one thing at a time and focus in on that, and then continue it. But we'll wrap it up. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you contributing to the dope. This was fun. It's different. It's fun to have you as a first guest. And where can we find you? Where can people?
Yeah, mainly you can find me Maret Magic on Instagram. I'm sure you'll have in the show notes all the spelling and all that, so I don't have to spell that out. That's kind of the only place right now. Also Maret Magic on TikTok. But it's a lot of the same material. I'm not quite as active on there. I try to be a little more active in the Instagram community. And then MaretMagic.com is my website.
I'll put it in the show notes so everyone can find it. I appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll have you back. You contributed to the Dope. For those who don't know, the Dope is our monthly publication on card magic. And Mark was nice enough to contribute a great piece about. You explain it. Pretty much like what is the piece on?
It was mostly about where we can be on like the foundations in magic, and just kind of like my own struggles that I've talked with other magicians in our age group about what we can be doing better for people getting into magic, and just relating it to like the other arts and how they're taught at a childhood foundational level.
Good. It was good. Thanks again, Mark, and
I
hope you guys enjoyed listening to it, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Take care.